Hello and welcome to the Lucas Rockwood Show. I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a trainer, I'm a nutritional coach, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a father, but first and foremost, I'm a student, and this show is really about me scratching my own itch to learn. And I invite authors and experts and medical doctors and researchers and yoga teachers and anyone who I think will have some great information to help you live a more fulfilled life. On this week's show, we'll be talking about alcohol, specifically stopping drinking. And this has been a recurring theme recently. We've had a few different guests on the show talking about anywhere from minor to very major alcohol problems and thinking about strategic ways to get over that. And that sounds really obvious and that sounds really clear. You check yourself into AA and you quit drinking. But the reality is most people are not what might be stereotypically thought of as alcoholics. Most people have not bottomed out in a way that might be on a Sunday afternoon television show. Most people are functionally drinking, and it's really making a mess of their life in very small, subtle, compounding ways over the years. And oftentimes that one glass of wine after dinner turns into 2, turns into 3, and within a decade or so, many people are up to 20 to 35 drinks per week, which is a disaster for your health. It's a disaster for your mood, and it will definitely shorten your lifespan. There's this idea that red wine is healthy or something like this. This is all silly. There's a little bit of resveratrol in there, but really, if you're telling yourself that your drinking habit is for your heart health or something, you're telling yourself good things about bad habits. On this week's show, we'll be talking about alcohol, and I don't want this to in any way come off as preachy or any kind of platform. I have no anti-alcohol platform whatsoever or agenda. My agenda is really just to help you think about this in a different way. I spent way too much of my life drinking alcohol. Don't look back fondly on those years at all. And I'm really, really pleasantly sober recently. And I think that not enough people experiment with this. I think people are much more likely to do a 7-day juice cleanse than they are to do, 30 days or, sober January, which is something people try, or 3 months sober, or something like this. And what kind of doors will it open up for you? I don't know. But maybe you'll feel a little better. Maybe you'll look a little bit better. Maybe you'll think a little bit better. Maybe you'll lose some weight, maybe you'll have more motivation to go to the gym, or maybe you'll feel exactly the same. I'm not sure, but the one thing I am sure is that you will notice, because as an adult person in the world, no matter which country you live in, if you step outside of the alcohol imbibing circle that is everywhere, you'll see your life change, and you'll see the world differently, and you will very quickly find extra time, extra choices, different social opportunities. You'll also find a lot of doors closing, which is kind of shocking at first, but can end up becoming very interesting. Hope you find this episode helpful. As always, your questions, comments, and feedback are most welcome. You can email me, podcast@yogabody.com. So hello and welcome. It's Lucas Rockwood here. I'm here with Annie Grace. Today's show is called Do You Drink Too Much? Annie grew up in a one-room log cabin without running water, without electricity, in a very unique story in Aspen, Colorado. And at the age of 26, she was the youngest vice president in a big multinational, and that's when she started drinking. At 35, she had a C-level marketing role, and she was responsible for marketing in 28 different countries, and drinking kind of took over her life, which we'll get into here in the call today. She left her executive role when she quit drinking, and she started This Naked Mind, which is a book, and it's a website which you can find at thisnakedmind.com, and we'll learn more about what she's up to. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
I had my first drink at age 13, and I'm guessing because of your upbringing and the way that you were raised, I'm guessing you had quite a different story.
Yeah, I didn't drink very much at all. In fact, not even really in college. I can probably count the times I drank in college on one hand. So it wasn't really until I moved to New York City, and I was sort of told that showing up at the bar was a lot like the golf course. It's where the deals were done, and why wasn't I at happy hour? Didn't I care about my career? And it was this, okay, well, I wasn't averse to drinking, so I was like, sure, I'll show up, I'll play.
Very important distinction that I think a lot of listeners have, and I think a lot of people, they don't put themselves in the category of alcoholic, and yet at the same time they have a drinking problem. And I kind of relate it in the same way to food. A lot of people don't necessarily have a massive food problem, and yet they have episodes of binge eating, or they have, they accidentally on purpose can't control themselves, have a pint of Haagen-Dazs every night or whatever it is. And very similar behaviors happen in and around alcohol. So maybe they've never, thrown up drunk. Maybe they've never blacked out drunk. Maybe they've never crashed the car or bottomed out. But, they're getting up there with the drinks, meaning 20, 25, 30, 35 drinks a week. And people are kind of concerned. So I know that you've been doing this now for quite a while and you talk to different people. How do you help people think about labeling themselves, if it matters at all? Alcoholic, non-alcoholic, substance abuse, habitual drinker. Are those labels helpful at all?
I think it really depends where you are. I mean, I feel like people can find a lot of freedom in the label alcoholic if they've been in denial for a really long time. So if this has been creeping in and creeping in, getting worse and getting worse and getting worse, I've heard from people that the moment they say, oh my gosh, okay, I'm an alcoholic, they start to feel hope because they've named it, they see what it is, there's a path to change it. But I think that's not really true for a lot of people. I mean, according to the CDC, this statistic blows my mind, but basically of excessive drinkers, so people drinking more than 8 drinks a week for women, more than 15 for men, of excessive drinkers, only 10% are chemically addicted to alcohol. So 10% would really fit in that alcoholic category. So there's 90% of excessive drinkers who wouldn't fit in that category. And the addiction is much more emotional. You want a glass of wine at the end of the day because it relaxes you or it makes you feel good, or you feel deprived if you can't have it. But you can certainly give up drinking for a period of time. And I think it really is a spectrum. The more we drink, the more addictive it is, the more it changes our brain, the more we get further and further on into the spectrum. But when we're trying to think about it in the early days, it's really not helpful in my story to start to think, oh, am I an alcoholic when I didn't feel like one? Because if there isn't a question, would I be happier drinking a bit less? Or maybe the question isn't even, is this a problem? Maybe the question is this good enough? Is life good enough drinking this much? Is it good enough to have a hangover every Saturday and Sunday morning? Is that good enough for me? And that really flips the whole conversation.
I like that analogy a lot, and I think I didn't know those numbers, but if excessive drinking is 8 drinks a week for a woman and 15 for a man, I think probably at least half our listeners right now fall into that category, and they haven't really thought about it. What I find is I've had drinking problems at a couple of different times in my life, and what I find is most people don't do the math, and what I mean by that is they don't add up the drinks. And so, I just have a few drinks. And it's like, yeah, but you have a few drinks every night. And then on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you have 7 drinks. And, you add up the math. And what does that really look like over a weekly basis? And then you play that out over months and years. And the role that bottle is playing in your life, suddenly instead of becoming this minor character, it's like a major character of your after dark hours, which is when, most people end up drinking.
Yeah, I love that idea of a major character. I think that's really a great description, because when I started this journey for myself, I mean, not only was I not doing the math, which I also think is a great way to think about it. I wasn't doing the math, but I was waking up in the middle of the night feeling this like intense pressure, this anxiety, feeling like, oh man, I only meant to have 1 or 2. I had 4 or 5, maybe more. I can't even count. What's wrong with me? What's going on? And I felt just all this, misery. But then I'd wake up the next day and rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And I remember that I thought very distinctly, like, okay, I can stop. Like, I can stop for every time I'm pregnant. I can stop for months. I can just stop for weeks. But I'm miserable when I do. I feel like I'm deprived and like I'm missing out. And I remember thinking, like, I want this to be minor. I want it to be irrelevant. I want it to be little, like it used to be. I don't want it to be a major character in my life anymore.
This was back in maybe 2005 or something. I quit drinking a couple of different times, this most recent time for quite a long time. But I met a guy, and he had recently he had recently started drinking again. He kind of did a promise to himself that he'd do a year without drinking. And I was just totally fascinated because I love these kinds of things. I love diets and fasting and cleansing and all these kinds of things. And I was, at the time, I didn't have any kind of problems or anything like that. And I was chatting with him. I was like, oh, that's so great. You quit drinking. How was it? He's like, I have to tell you, it was the worst year of my life. I had no social life. Nobody here who's at this party, for example, called me. I had nothing going on. He's like, I consciously decided to go back to drinking just to fix my social life. And this was a single guy, and he was in his early 30s, and we were living in Hong Kong at the time, and his social life revolved around alcohol. And I just thought, like, wow, that is honest and brutal and super sad and tragic. And at different times, when I peel back the layers, I had to be pretty honest. Like, it's pretty easy to have friends and have a very active social life, and most adult social life revolves around alcohol, whether it's the after school kids' birthday parties where the parents are drinking and the kids are in the jumping around the balls or whatever they're doing, or it's the barbecue, or whether it's just this lousy Amazon original television series that couples are watching and it's so bad that they have to drink just to get through it. It's really, adult life really revolves around the bottle. And I think, people, it's one thing to talk about the chemical addiction. It's another thing just to look at the stark reality that this whole society, and I've lived in 5 different countries, I haven't been to one yet where adult life didn't revolve around alcohol. And so to pull that out, it's really, really challenging. So how did that affect you, and how do you help people think about that element? Because it's just so real.
Yeah, it's so real. And it's funny because right at the beginning of my book, I say, I can teach you to not want to drink because I can help you undo your subconscious conditioning around drinking. I can unwind that. And I say that's the easy part. The hard part is really going against this groupthink and this herd mentality that we have around drinking. And it's really difficult. And it's really difficult because we're so tribal. We want to fit in. We want to be part of things. We don't want to be different or other or else. And so to take a stand and say, hey, I'm going to be in this kind of radical minority of people who's doing something different, it's intense, and it can be really intense. I think that what helped me is understanding that how I approached it was going to affect my entire experience. So if I approached it with oh yeah, no, sorry, I overdid it and I'm not drinking right now, I'm kind of in a timeout, pity party, people would be nice to me. They'd have pity on me, but then they would not invite me the next time because they'd be like, oh, well, we don't want to drink in front of her. It makes us feel bad, right? Whereas if I approached it with hey, what's up? Like, Annie, do you want to drink? And I was like, yeah, great. I need an iced tea. I really need the caffeine before I get started. And then just leave it at that. It was like a non-issue. So if I made it a non-issue, it was a non-issue. But if I made it an issue and really got into it, then it really became an issue.
One of the challenges I find is I do lots of weird things in my life, but I haven't eaten meat in 17 years. I can usually get away for months without people noticing that. And even my little boy is almost 8, and he still hasn't really figured that one out, which is just hilarious. But he knows I don't drink. And in any room I go into, I don't get away with it. I think part of it is as a man too. I think men, I don't know if this is a sexist thing or whatever, but I feel like I get a lot less slack. But I really have a hard time getting away with it within 10 minutes in any social situation. Somebody is confronting me about the fact that I'm not drinking, and I do the opposite of not preaching. I'm hiding it all the time just because I don't want to have the conversation. It's not like holier than thou. It's just I just don't want to get into it, and I just find it so. Not that I want to drink, but it's just such a strange thing when you're doing something positive for your life and you get at least for me, I get so little social support for it. Just the opposite. People either want to know that you crashed your car into a wall, which of course I never did, or they want to know, when you're gonna get over this little detox thing and start drinking again.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that really has helped me with that, because I've had that experience too. I mean, you can't not drink for this much time in this many situations and not have every realm of experience. But one of the things that really helped me is when I started to just really get observation about the people who were giving me the hardest time. And it was never the people who were really peaceful in their own relationship with alcohol. It was always the people who were the ones saying like, oh man, I overdid it again, and it was because I remember this for myself. I remember a really close friend of mine about 11 years ago now. She said, hey guys, I went to AA, I stopped drinking. And we're like, wait, what? And I was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean about me? What does that mean about my relationship with alcohol? I drink just as much as you. And so unless I could put her, and she told me to ease my mind. She's like, Annie, I'm an alcoholic. I was born this way. I learned this about myself. You're not, don't worry about it. And while that eased my mind, it didn't have me questioning my drinking. It was like, okay, well then I don't fit in that box, so I must be in this box. So I continued to drink and continued to have negative ramifications for a long time after this conversation. But it really was, you either put somebody at ease by saying, no, there's something wrong with me. I'm an alcoholic. I had this rock bottom. I couldn't handle myself. And then people are at ease, but they feel kind of bad for you. And then that's not a good energy either.
Yeah.
Or you're coming into it with no, I'm just happier. And then you're doing the opposite of putting them at ease. You're shining a big fat flashlight into their own relationship with alcohol, totally unintentionally. You can have not a judgmental bone in your body, but if you're sitting down and cheesecake comes, and I know this is maybe a little more for women, but if a big cheesecake comes to the table and the first woman says, oh no, I don't want a piece. And then all of a sudden, even no matter how desperately you wanted a piece, you're not going to be the one like diving in, right? Because you're like, nope, now I'm judged. No matter what that other woman's intent, it could be totally for her, but we can't help feeling judged by other people's behavior, which is such a bummer when you're doing something like this.
When I meet people who aren't drinking, very few people have a story like mine, which is just pretty blasé. But many people have stories of, literally getting a DUI. I had a friend who got a DUI. I have another colleague who had a pretty major health crisis, and it was just pretty clear that alcohol was contributing, if not causing. And so people often have this sort of head against the wall moment where it's pretty clear they need to make a choice. I'm curious, did you have a moment like that, or was it kind of like a slow burn, or what was your flip?
Yeah, I can tell you a few of my moments, and you'll probably laugh because they're so not the typical. I mean, I had one moment when my 4-year-old at the time, I wanted him to come sit on my lap, and he told me that he didn't want to because my teeth were purple and I smelled funny. And so it was stuff like that, right? Like stuff that's deep in the heart, but really was never, there was never any driving drunk or waking up not knowing. I don't even remember ever even really having a blackout. I remember things being fuzzy, but I was the person who, when I stopped drinking, everybody looked at me like, you stopped drinking? You're not the one who we thought should stop drinking. And so it was almost as if I was going up, again, they couldn't put me in that box of, oh yeah, you're the one falling off the table at the Christmas party. No wonder. Okay, we get it. We feel for you.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the kid thing. It was the same thing for me. My little boy spoke really late. And really late. He was like, he's got a bunch of languages, so he was really struggling with words. And one of the first things he said was "Daddy Vino," which I live in Spain.
Wow.
First word is wine. Same sort of thing. Nothing bad. He was really proud of himself to say it, but it's just one of those things. Just like your kid making a comment about your teeth, you just go, oh,
Yeah.
And, nobody holds up a mirror to your character flaws, at least for me, like my kids. And it's just that was a stronger motivator for me than anything. And so I guess what happens, you have people listening and they're going, yeah, I drink too much, but I haven't really had anything out of control. Haven't really, nothing really bad. This is such an integral part of my social life. I go out with the girls for gin and tonics on Fridays or whatever it is. It's such a big part of their life. How would you help people perhaps just reframe that? And again, maybe a bunch of people listening probably don't need to make changes. Maybe they're doing just fine. But I'm guessing probably half the people listening who drink probably are drinking too much. And so how would you help people think about this in a way that can just give them a little bit of a reframe, and at least not necessarily talking about going sober, but just thinking about getting this under control, or I guess defining what control even means?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say a few things. I'd say, first of all, if you have a voice in your head, no matter if it's in the middle of the night or at the end of the day, or just some little voice in your head that's saying, hey, hold on a second. Maybe this isn't great for us. Maybe this is too much. And you're immediately meeting that voice with fear. Let go of the fear. Drop the fear. The fear comes from all sorts of places like, oh, but what if this means I'm an alcoholic? What if this means I really have a problem? What if this means I never get to drink again? I'm here to tell you that none of those things are probably true. Alcoholic is not even medically or scientifically really defined anymore. They don't even use the term. And, the idea of never even having to drink again, the people who I know who make that decision, they make it from a place of like, that's what they want. It's not because they have to. And so if you can drop the fear around that voice is just going to get louder and louder. It's not going to get quieter. But the sooner you listen to that voice, the sooner you can make changes that might mean that you can still drink in moderation, or you can still drink on occasion. And that voice, I think it's one of the most painful parts of any sort of addiction that's creeping in, is because you both want to do more and less of something at the same time. And if you think about conflict, we don't even like to see conflict across the street. We don't even like to witness it. We don't like to fight with the people we love the most. But then you think about this, and when you're having that voice that's telling you should be doing something different than what you are doing, you're literally having conflict inside your own brain and inside yourself. And that's one of the most painful and eroding things. Like, there's nothing that will diminish your self-respect, your self-love, your view of yourself than fighting with yourself about your behavior. And so just allowing that voice to be, and stop asking the question like, oh, am I an alcoholic? Is this bad? What does this mean? Just be like, is this good enough for me? And get really curious about that. Get curious about just, I'm going to go to a party without a drink, and I'm going to get curious about it. If that means I'm in the corner, like, crying and everybody makes fun of me and I get kicked out, then that's going to be my experience. It's a data point. But maybe I'll go and actually have a good time, and that's going to be an experience instead of just making that assumption. And I just also say, I mean, really realize that you're not alone in this. Like, there are millions and millions and millions of people who are questioning their drinking. But unfortunately in society, because it's such a part of our society and people feel so personally judged when somebody stops drinking, it's not like we can sit here and say, oh, there's so many calories and, that ice cream, I'm only going to have a bite. Like, we should be able to say stuff like that about alcohol. Like, oh man, it's pretty addictive, so I'm just going to limit myself to one. But we don't have that kind of honest, mindful conversation. But if we can get really curious and just realize we're not alone in it, the more people that start to talk more mindfully about alcohol, the more the whole thing will shift, and not shift towards teetotalism or nobody's drinking. So that's just not realistic, but really shift to we're thinking about it. We're not just doing this without considering what, it implies.
So where I live, not so much, but in North America, pretty much every adult who drinks drives drunk. And nobody wants to talk about this. They have Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They have all these organizations. And yet there's a cowboy bar 20 miles from anything, and the parking lot's filled. And everyone's inside. I mean, the whole way society's set up is a disaster. It's the statistic, because it's like, after 11 p.m. or something, 20% of people are legally drunk or something like that. It's like, of course that's true. How could it not be true? There's restaurants and bars that people drive to. There's no other way to get there. And so that's the one thing that I think a lot about, which is just kind of bonkers and kind of crazy in terms of people just putting their own health and the safety of their children in mind. But the other thing that I think about too is a lot of people just don't, again, getting back to the math, just like they don't really go to the doctor and actually get a liver health panel done and just see what's happening. There's usually some pretty negative stuff, and sometimes I wish the carrot was a strong motivator. I wish this idea of getting healthy and feeling balanced, but it certainly wasn't for me. I needed to be humiliated by my kid. A lot of people need to crash their car. A lot of people need a DUI. Whatever it is, like, if you don't have a strong enough stick right now, I would encourage people to go out and look for one. And sometimes that's a medical test that tells you you've got the liver of somebody 30 years older than you. Sometimes that's, having an honest conversation with your significant other. Sometimes that's counting up those bottles that you're hiding under the sink or whatever it is. But like, sometimes you have to engineer that stick, because unfortunately the carrot doesn't seem to be enough of a draw for most people. Absolutely. I think that's so true. And I think we are, we're motivated. I think in the short term, fear is an amazing motivator. And I think fear to just get you to a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to try something new. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try something new. But then over the long term, I think really where it sustains is with the carrot. Like, once you say, oh, this is better. It is amazing to wake up and not be hungover. But I think you're right. Like, we need that moment. And that's why rock bottom is such a real, true thing, is because we don't pay attention until, like, I think you and I both saw where this train was going, and we said, okay, I'm going to get off that train before it crashes. But a lot of people, we see where it's going, and then we just ignore it and ignore it and ignore it. And it isn't until the crash that we're actually willing to stop and pay attention. I understand you had some challenges with back pain. If I'm correct, you got into Dr. Sarno's work and you saw some correlations between that and drinking. Can you share a little bit of that experience? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was 3 years of not being able to even pick up my kids. I tried traction. I tried acupuncture, muscle relaxants, every single thing you could try. And it wasn't until I read Dr. Sarno's book, Healing Back Pain, and he really makes the case that, like, there is something at a very deep subconscious level. Your body is trying to protect itself from thoughts that it believes are abhorrent through pain. But I can't convince your conscious mind of this. I have to convince your subconscious mind. And in order to do that, you have to read this 300-page book, and your pain will disappear. And I was skeptical, but desperate. And so I did it. I read the book, and my pain, it went away. It was one of the most miraculous things I've ever experienced, ever. And I started to think, like, wow, could this be the same? Like, do I have this, really conscious desire to be drinking less, but I have these deep-seated subconscious beliefs around alcohol, that it relaxes me, that it's important even for sex or having a good time or fun or networking or being part of the group. And so I can't, whenever I try to drink less, I'm stymied by these other beliefs that are strong, and I can't sustain, willpower against them for long. And what if I could change those beliefs fundamentally, like at the subconscious level? What if I could rewire that thinking? What would that mean? And so I actually reached out to Dr. Sarno, who was still alive at the time. He put me in touch with a man called Steve Ozanich,
who had been carrying on his work. And Steve and I got on the phone and had like a 2-hour Skype call where I said, hey, would this work? Is it the same thing? And Steve's like, absolutely. Like, it is this. Dr. Sano's always said there's some of the same mechanisms at work in addiction as in, the subconscious pain. And so he gave me a lot of resources, and it really launched me into the work to do, to free myself from alcohol, first of all, but then also to write my book, which is what it's completely based on, is undoing that subconscious conditioning around alcohol.
So you write this book and you really make a big change. You go from kind of an executive level life, and from what I understand, you're living back in Colorado. Tell us a little bit about that change, and what has the reception been? Have you found quite a community of people? Has it been a struggle to connect with people? How has it been?
It's been really interesting. I mean, I did not stop working for about a year and a half after I wrote the book, and so that was probably the most interesting part, like going trips to Brazil and not tasting their local drinks and getting, in trouble about that, or in Paris, networking out at wine bars and whatnot and not drinking. That was definitely interesting and unique, but I think also was really good. It gave me so much experience of like, how do people react? What's happening here? And then when it really started to take off, I got an opportunity to either move to London with my current job, or to, if I decided not to move, to really take a severance package. And so because I had the book, I was like, all right, I'm going to go all in on this and see if I can, make this work. And so we did that. We took the severance package, and we ended up, staying in Colorado. And it's been awesome. I think that it's really interesting how you do kind of, like, over the years, not only have my friendships kind of changed and morphed in some of the best ways, but also there's definitely people who we just don't hang out with anymore, who, they're just living a different lifestyle. And those have pretty naturally kind of gone by the wayside. And it's been okay. It's been good, really. It's been kind of this renewing. And then ironically, I end up meeting people through just the craziest circumstances who are like, just after a year of knowing them, I'll find out that they haven't had a drink in 10 years or whatever the case is. But it's just kind of attracting, these like-minded people, which has been really cool. So all in all, it's been really positive, but I won't say it's not without, definitely you're going out there, you're going against the grain. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
The first time I quit drinking, I kind of had an agenda. I wanted to try. I started drinking when I was 13. And I was in my kind of mid-20s when I gave it up for a couple of years. And I kind of wanted to try it just as an experiment. And so, talk to people about it and preach. This most recent time, I have no agenda, no platform, no nothing. And so it's been a completely different experience. But I've experienced the same things as you. One thing that I've noticed very recently is that a lot of older people stop drinking. So let's call older people 60 plus, something like that. And a lot of times it's because they just don't have the fortitude to really handle it. So the same 3 drinks that they used to be able to handle really wipes them out. And if, at that age, a very large percentage of people are dealing with something, whether it's a heart condition or blood sugar issue or something like that. And of course, drinking doesn't help. And it's been kind of interesting just to think like, okay, if this is the path that I'm going to, like, why not just fast forward? Maybe I'm just mature. Maybe it's not that I'm boring and don't drink. Maybe it's just that I'm mature for my age and I'm seeing that this is the writing's on the wall. But as I've gotten older, I certainly have started to meet more and more people who don't drink, and more people who just do their best to not drink. So maybe they haven't. I don't drink at all, but there's a lot of people who just do their best to never drink, and maybe once in a while they'll have a drink just to be social. But there's literally nothing in the house, and it's not part of their life. And definitely in this phase of my life, I'm middle-aged now, there's been a lot more people than when I was in my 20s and 30s, for example.
Yeah, and it's so true. And the science really backs that up. Like, alcohol has a cycle. And it has a cycle of, you can have a really, really slow ramp up, but the sooner you kind of ramp up, the sooner you reach to, drinking. And I think my ramp up really happened when I was traveling internationally, because international cultures are very heavy drinking. You're really pressured. And as it ramps up, it kind of ramps up and peaks within a few years. And then people realize that, like, no, this is not doing me any good. So it is very much like that bell curve, and when you talk to somebody who's had, that's why so many older celebrities are sober, right? Because, like, they're ramp up was so intense. Like if you have a massive ramp up and, crazy time in your 20s and stuff, then yeah, you're probably not going to be a big drinker in your 40s because it kind of runs its course and you're kind of like, okay, did that. That's not doing me any favors. And the sooner you realize it, I was talking to somebody and they're like, yeah, it just stopped working. It stopped working for the things I thought it was working for. And I had the same experience. Like I was drinking to feel tipsy and feel outgoing and networking and all this stuff. And all of a sudden I could drink, an entire bottle of wine and not even feel it. And I'm like, yeah, why am I doing this? Like, what's the point?
Yeah, I think at some point too, the ramifications, you just can't hide from them. And, older celebrities, same thing. They look bad, they think bad, and they feel bad. Whereas maybe when you're in your 20s and 30s, like you can really pull it off for quite a while. You have this resiliency of youth. But as you get older, those, if you start to see, that's where you're going. You wake up the next day and you're literally worse at your job. Like those things. I mean, of course you were worse younger too, but you just didn't notice it. But when you start to really notice it, and so again, why not speed things up if you can? For your book and your platform and what you're doing now, what are you hoping to do, and what kinds of people are you connecting with?
It's a lot of pretty high-powered executives. I mean, I feel like I really resonate with that crowd, and a lot of doctors, a lot of lawyers, definitely a lot of, people in their 60s and above. And also a lot of younger people too are just kind of like having this awakening really early on. So, I'm loving it. I launched this about a year and a half ago. It's a free 30-day challenge called The Alcohol Experiment at alcoholexperiment.com. And it is just the coolest thing. There's 50,000 people who have gone through it so far. And it's just like amazing because it's all about just like dip a toe, see how it goes, see what this means for you in your life, kind of no strings attached. And I think it really resonates with people. I mean, my goal overall is to lower the barrier to entry into the conversation. I feel like for me to question my drinking was such massive hurdles to overcome. Do I have a problem? Am I an alcoholic? Does this mean I can never, go out again? Like it was so much fear. And if I can reduce some of that and just lower the barrier to entry into a more mindful conversation around alcohol, I will feel like, really done what I set out to do.
Annie, I love what you're doing. I'm excited to pick up your book. I know a lot of our readers will as well. Where should we send people to connect with you online?
I think the alcoholexperiment.com is the perfect place to go if you're curious and you want to get started.
Back in 2005 and 2006, I was running and eventually owning a yoga studio, and we had a big problem. We needed to staff up. We needed to hire more teachers, and we just couldn't find qualified applicants. Literally, we would put out a job ad, we'd interview a bunch of people, and most quote-unquote certified teachers just couldn't teach a good class. So we started in-house trainings. In fact, my first 2 courses, there was no paying people at all. We actually sponsored people to take the course, and we hired them, and they became teachers, many of whom are still teachers today, all these years later. And in 2006, we opened up our first course to the public and started training professional teachers, and we used this same approach. The idea was we want people job ready by the end of the course so that we can hire them, or that somebody can hire them. And interestingly enough, this was one of the only courses in the world that was actually training professional teachers. Most yoga courses, you sing some songs, you eat some lentils, and you get a certificate. At our course, you actually learn professional skills, public speaking, applied anatomy, nutrition, physiology, all of the skills that local yoga students are looking for. That's why our graduates are among the highest paid, most employed, most successful teachers in the world. This year we have our 4,000th graduate completing our programs, and it's one of the things that brings me the most joy in all the work that I do. We have a bunch of programs I'd encourage you to check out if you're thinking about becoming a yoga teacher in 2019, and all of them can be found at yogateacherscollege.com, yogateacherscollege.com/calendar to see all of our upcoming events. We have courses as short as 1 week and as long as 6 months, and we even have online training programs for those of you who can't travel to train with us. Hope that's helpful, and I look forward to talking with you more and hopefully training with you sometime in the future here in the upcoming year. I used to have a restaurant in Thailand called the Love Kitchen, and we had a drink called Happy Belly. And Happy Belly was made with pineapple, cilantro, and ginger, which sounds absolutely disgusting, but it's delicious. And the reason we call it Happy Belly is because both ginger and cilantro are anti-inflammatory, and so they help to make your belly happy. A full glass of pineapple juice is quite a bit of sugar, but if you take cilantro and pineapple and ginger and blend them and then strain it and then put it in a shooter like you were having a shot glass, it's a really great elixir, very, very healing. So cilantro is great at chelating heavy metals. It's an antioxidant, but that anti-inflammatory aspect is what I really like about it. A lot of people use herbs too sparingly. They use them as condiments and dressings on plates. I'd encourage you to get comfortable taking hefty doses of things like cilantro and parsley and mint. And one way that can be really helpful for that is if you start to blend them up or chop them up and use them completely in salad. So cilantro is your nutritional tip of the week. Give it a try and let me know what you think of that pineapple ginger cilantro drink. I have a listener question from listener Raman. Says, you mentioned several basic range of motion poses that human beings should be able to do. Can you please suggest 5 or 6 stretches that you believe are the most efficient, safest stretches to achieve basic range of motion? I want to dedicate 10 minutes per day. I'd love 5 passive poses. I've been teaching flexibility for a long time. If you're interested in my program, check it out. It's called Gravity Yoga. You can find it on yogabody.com, but I don't want to dodge the question. Let me get right into it. If I had to have 5 poses for supplemental stretching, this is pretty much my routine, if we're being honest. Most nights I do about 15 minutes of supplemental stretching, and I have for years. Here are my go-to poses. Ragdoll, really basic one. Step your feet as wide as your hips, bend your knees a little bit, flop forward, grab your elbows, hang. 2 to 5 minutes, really great place to be. By the time you get to 5 minutes, your legs will feel pretty gummy and they'll be wobbly. That's what you're looking for. The second one I would do is a hero pose. So sit down on your knees, separate your feet, sit down between your heels. And then if you're comfortable, if your bum's on the ground, you can lie all the way back in a sleeping hero pose. I would do that for at least 5 minutes when you work up to it, and sometimes I go even longer. I'll do that one in bed. The next pose that I would do is hangman. Hangman's a quintessential gravity yoga pose. For the shoulders, lie on your belly with your crown of your head against the wall and your arms at your sides. Stay right where you are. Extend your arms up the wall. Spread your fingers like down dog and drop your head. If you try to follow along with my voice without actually doing it, it won't make any sense. But if you just hit play on your podcast thing and go do this, these poses will actually work out. So we're at 3 poses there. These are really great. I would now suggest doing a blaster pose. Blaster is another quintessential gravity yoga pose. From downward facing dog, step your right foot outside your hands and now heel toe your foot more forward, more forward, more forward. Drop your back knee, drop down to your elbows, drop your head. Full 5 minutes on either side. I'll give you those 4, because if you do those 4 and you do that last one, you have to do a right and a left side, you'll already be a little bit past your time there. So I would encourage you to do those 4. These are often the 4 that I do. If you wanted to add a couple of others, a Baddha Konasana, I just call it a butterfly stretch, is a really great one. And if you really want to get into some more intensity, frontal splits on both the right and left side are a good way to go. Hope that's helpful.
This week's iTunes review is by Esme Rose from Spain. Esme Rose says, Dear Lucas, I've been studying an online master's degree in nutritional therapy and functional medicine. Due to the nature of distance learning, I began to feel disconnected from my studies with no sense of community. Since listening to your podcasts religiously, I now feel I have found that community to challenge and motivate me in learning. Please know you are changing lives as you share your knowledge of breath, yoga, nutrition, and life. Thank you warmly. Esme Rose, you have won the Yoga Trapeze. Email us at podcast@yogabody.com and we will get that to you.
I recently led a 6-week podcast startup bootcamp. It was a coaching program designed to take people from concept, from zero, all the way to published podcast, published show. I'd like to share 4 of those shows with you today. The first one is called A Life Well Lived with Bill Fleenor. The next one is called Beauty Detangled with Paula Davis. Taming Aunt Flo with Sarah Yingling, Compassion as My Compass with Ariel Zakal. I will link up to all 4 of these shows in the show notes. If you go to yogabody.com and scroll down, you'll see the show notes right there on the homepage. I'll also link up to them on our Instagram account, which is @yogabody, and I'll link up in the story so you can find them really quickly. Congratulations to these 4 students. We have a bunch more shows that'll be published in the weeks to come. It was a really great program. I know the next question you'll be asking is, when can I join the program? I don't think I'm going to hold another one until 2020, but if you're interested, go to yogateacherscollege.com/calendar and you can see what else we're working on. Congratulations to these new podcasts, and I'd encourage all of you to check them out.